you, I hope, are already familiar with, and it is called the cycle of doom. Trent has created for us, and it's out there on LinkedIn. If you go and find it, you can find this stuff. You can also go to CMMSradio.com, look under Real Deal Pro articles, and you'll see these 7 cycles of doom. And what we had today, and I couldn't sit in on it, and we're going to talk to Trent about it right now, is we had a capstone that really takes it over the top and gives us some further insights. That will eventually become public, Trent?
Yes. Yep.
First of all, Trent, welcome back to CMMS Radio, man.
Thanks, Greg. Happy to be here.
Oh, I always like catching up with you, man. Not just seeing you and visiting, but hearing what you've been working on, hearing what you're doing. And I'm so glad we were able to bring you to StrEAMline to do this presentation. I know last year we got to do a panel discussion, which was awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Always awesome for me because I want to talk to real people, real deal pros, people that actually care about what we're doing here. So when it comes to this cycle of doom, which we've talked about before, and those articles are out there for people to find and read, I encourage you all to do that. What happened today? What did you present about just generally, and how did it kind of move us further along in understanding and what the cycle of doom is and what to do about it?
So I think whenever you read the cycle of doom, you're looking at your laptop or you read on your phone, and it kind of resonates with you. I've been there. This guy gets it. But today in the room, something that we were able to do is, give me a show of hands. Have you felt this before? And you got to look around the room and say, I'm not the only one who feels this at this conference. There are also people who feel stuck, just like I do. They feel like they're overwhelmed. And they really got to go through the cycle of doom really quickly and understand, all right, here are the things that cause us to be in the cycle of doom. Here's how organizations spiral into failure, but there's also a better way out. We don't have to stay stuck. And we were able to unpack all that and really solve some problems for some folks who had questions and say, hey, here's where I'm struggling, here's where I'm stuck. What would you do?
Did the room have different aspects of the cycle of doom that they were experiencing, with was it the burnout, and was it this one? Was there any common denominator, or was it kind of all over the place?
I think it was a lot of shared understanding of they're all in different places, but they've all experienced all of the stages, whether it was they've inherited an ambiguous scope for a project, or they've been somewhere where it was institutionalized failure. And this is just the way things are here, and it's just no good, and everywhere in between. It's
one of the more common things we've always heard about, and we're probably always going to encounter. But the reality behind why you created this anyway is there really is a way forward.
Right.
Not
Certainly.
Easy, but there's a way forward. What would that be? Where would somebody start in your view?
In my view, I think you have to start with acknowledging what the truth is. We don't have it all together. We've made some poor decisions. Call what those are. We don't have design specs. We don't have a rotating equipment standard. We don't specify new equipment well. Call it what it is, because everyone else already knows. Start there. Kill the ambiguity. Start writing good specs for whatever your assets are. I don't care if you're in oil and gas, automotive, food, pharma, whatever. Start with good standards, and then start to build those quick wins with your team to rebuild that trust.
Do you think smaller operations, like really small operations, should be looking at this as well?
100%. I think smaller operations can actually make more of an impact. They can come in, and there's not as much bureaucracy or politics. They can come in and say, here is how this poorly written scope has impacted the bottom line, and here's what we need to do differently. We need to make sure that we add these specs in. These procedures have to be in place. Alignment, the mounting of any kind of rotating equipment, things like that. They can make those quick wins faster, because a lot of times there's much less red tape.
Yeah, and that red tape, and you mentioned the politics or the bureaucracy, it's a real thing that is stifling, and so many organizations have to simply live with it because, hey, this is policy. How annoying is that? How does that translate into how people take their work home with them, like in a bad way?
I think it definitely weighs on the person. We really talked about oxytocin and cortisol and how that's a seesaw. And you know, if your body's designed to use cortisol in short bursts, and if you're running it with 12 hours on a shift, then eventually you're going to get burned out. And burnout's not, I need some time off or I need a vacation. Burnout's just a thing that happens whenever you stop to believe in the system.
That's a sad moment because, you know, we sell our labor out in the world. We want to earn the money, but we want to be in environments where we can make an impact. I think especially in maintenance and everything related to it, skilled trades, people want to do good work. There's plenty of skaters and people that are going to cut corners, and maybe they're a little bit lazy. I don't know. They can work on that. But I think people generally want to do good work. And when you have to suffer through that level of stress, you're talking about, cortisol in and of itself, it damages us, our body, our brains. And then you got to get up in the morning and drag yourself to work instead of like, yeah, I get to go to work today and do some good stuff. And I think a lot of times that's what maintenance people want to do. You know better than I think. You know, you've been around a lot of teams, you've built teams, you've managed teams. You think generally speaking, they really just want to do good work and they don't want a lot of impedance. They're okay if problems come up and they need to get to solve them.
Yeah. I think it's a double-edged sword. You know, maintenance people want to be the hero and they want to save the day, but they also kind of want some structure and they want to have pride in their work. And burnout can show up in different ways. It's not just everybody's upset all the time and everybody's frustrated and angry. Burnout can show up as the technician who sits in their car until the very last minute to go clock in because they know I'm about to get run ragged for the next 12 hours.
Yeah. How common would you say it is I know it would depend on organizational size and what we're doing, but when it comes to production environments, that we see those longer 12-hour shifts, is that typically by design, depending on how the organization is managing their production? I've always been curious about why are there 8-hour versus 12-hour versus 2 shifts run through a plant. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the industry and what your production demands are and how you kind of intended your plant to run. But you have some plants who they intend to run 8s. And then they're running 10s, and then the 10s turn into 12s. And then it just, you can't really mandate more than 12, but sometimes a breakdown turns into 16, 18, 20 hours.
And it can go even further than that. Yeah. You know, it can be all hands on deck for 2 straight days, maybe even worse than that. We've heard all kinds of crazy stories, and it's all because of something that could have been prevented. But if you're dealing with teams and human beings, people that have that burnout, they're just not quite going to get to their best performance because they're being held back.
Right.
And they might even think it's their own fault, and it's not really. Like you're not going to win the long game if you allow burnout to fester.
Right. And I think the leader's role in that is doing some energy management. We hear a lot about time management, but being able to step in and go to bat for your people and say, we need to conserve some of their energy because they've been getting after it for weeks on end. They need some time to chill out.
Is that hard to sell up the ladder? Like when you make that case, is it often challenged by leadership?
I think it is because you see people who are also in the same cycle of doom but carry the burden of responsibility more heavily. And their livelihood can sometimes be on the chopping block. So it's hard for them to be in that spot when that cortisol for them is really high. And it's actually almost impossible for you to have high cortisol, high stress, high anxiety, and that fight or flight to make good, reasonable, sound decisions, much less care about Joe Schmo maintenance tech. You know, we're never going to really say that it's hard for us to care about those people because we care about everybody. But in reality, if you don't know if you're going to be here in 6 months because of the KPIs, then you're going to do whatever you have to do If we got to work 7/12s, we're working 7/12s. And it's hard to take that step back and say, this is the longer path, but it's the better path to not burn out my people like consumables.
Yeah, one feels like constant survival mode, and the other, the better way, is if we're in a thriving mode. Mm-hmm. How do you feel like when it comes to us talking about the cycle of doom, identifying it, starting to improve it, does the technology play a role in that, or is it completely separate?
I think the technology can play a role. It's definitely, the technology can be a victim of the cycle of doom as well. You know, if you go out and you say you buy a new EAM or CMMS software and you have an ambiguous scope, and you think, well, they do this every day. They know what I need. And then you cut them a PO, and next thing you know, I can't track downtime. I can't tie my spare part inventory to my asset. I can't track life cycle cost. What can you do? Not much.
Yeah, that's the idea behind, if we're not burnt out and there's less ambiguity or no ambiguity, you get better quality data that you can make actionable. You can make decisions on it. Whereas if that ambiguity and the burnout are both in place, you're getting closeouts that don't make any sense. They're just boom, wham, bam, I'm out of here. Like, yep, done, no problem.
Yeah, machine down.
Yeah.
Fixed it. And that's what you get. And then you get these people who, they're really stuck. They're burnt out, they're firefighting, and someone comes in with this new initiative. We just need a better EAM. And then they roll out this initiative, and you're trying to get people to care about this new thing. It's like teaching a man who is drowning, try to teach him how to swim.
Yeah.
They're trying to get through the shift and trying to survive. They don't care about the new flavor of the month. So you kind of have to do some triage and stop the bleeding before any new initiative comes in.
Yeah, you got to fix that other stuff, and that falls back to what we always tend to lean in on with the people, the teams, the people, the process, the culture, and the culture itself tends to kind of define how well you can manage and maintain process. And that's all people stuff.
Yeah, it's all leadership.
So it really is beholden on the leader to recognize and understand and do a better job of listening and solutioning.
Exactly. The boring plant is probably the reliable plant, but the plant that's filled with the dramatics and watching all these things play out is probably the chaotic plant. And the difference between those is, one had a leader who was just being ran through by the system, and another one was the leader at some point in time who said, enough is enough. We have to do things differently, and here's why.
I wonder about how micromanagement plays a role in that, because sometimes leadership, even mid-level, tends to try to micromanage everything, and that sucks the life out of your team as well.
I think so. I think micromanagement comes from a place of either incompetence or fear. Either you don't know what you're doing, so you want to be in control of everything, or you feel like no one can do it as good as me, so I have to be involved.
Is it hard, because you've done this for sure, when you put someone in place, is it kind of hard to let them run, let them get up to speed because of other circumstances and the way you're measured? It kind of tricks you into thinking this isn't happening fast enough, it's never going to work, I got to get in there and do it. Is that kind of where some of that comes from?
I think it's definitely a skill you have to learn as a leader. It's not an optional thing. It's definitely the delegation piece is critical. And you can't delegate well if you don't know how you're being measured yourself.
Yeah. And it's also important I wonder how often organizations assess the impact and the value of their KPIs internally rather than those external profit margin, the price of the stock or whatever the hell it is. I wonder how often they make a practice of that. I mean, I know they might say they do, they might have policies around it, but I wonder how often they really execute that kind of internal assessment. What's our health in this regard as it relates to our people? And are these KPIs that we've been focused on, that they're beholden to, are they the wrong KPIs? I think a lot of times they have a hard time receiving it. They're just like, yeah, it's just not a thing. We're not even going to look at that.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think it takes a certain type of leader, a really high-level leader, to be able to mold that team and put those people in the cabinet to have a different opinion. There's a book called Team of Rivals. It's about Abraham Lincoln and how he filled his cabinet with people who disagreed with him violently on a lot of topics, but at the end of the day, they shared the same goal. They shared the same values. They wanted the same thing. And I think a lot of leaders can take a lot out of that book and say, you don't have to think the same way I do, but we have to have the same goal. So challenge me for the good.
In a reasonable way.
Right.
Yeah. I also wonder about that, because sometimes when teams are highly aligned, cohesive, and moving towards the same goal, and this can be organizationally, preferably, but when we're talking about, the maintenance team on the floor, working with, whoever's in charge of asset management and so forth, they can be fairly blunt with one another because they're not getting stuck on that kind of, oh, you just, gave me a microaggression, or you shouldn't be talking to me like that, because they're kind of, you think about like certain environments, you know what I'm trying to kind of describe here, where you can just be straight up, let's go, we got to do this. What are you doing, man? Quit doing that, man. That was dumb.
Yeah, I think you have to have that trust and that candor amongst your team, because the alternative of that is I have to watch what I say and how I say it, because it's going to be taken and packaged in a way and then broadcast to people that were not in the audience and used to manipulate someone.
Yeah. Well, there's zero context.
Right.
Or an altered context.
Yes.
Because it sounds so bad when somebody's like, oh, so-and-so called me a name or whatever. And I'm not saying it's okay to do that, but like if we're with our team and we've got a problem and we're trying to get dialed in and everybody's talking and you say, hey, everybody, can you just shut up for a minute so we can focus on this? You weren't trying to be rude. You're trying to get their attention and say, hey, just stop talking. But some people would say, well, he said shut up instead of be quiet. It's kind of weird. I don't know why I went to that spot, because I keep thinking about being in some of those environments I've been in, maybe not in the same capacity as yourself and your teams, but other situations, corporation, whatever the hell, right? Yeah. You're in meeting rooms and you want to speak bluntly and plainly so that you can actually accomplish something. Let's get some stuff up on the board that makes sense, that we all kind of say, yeah, I know that. And you got people in there that are, I don't know, they want you to be all proper.
Yeah. I think it's important to have those guardrails and ground rules, rules of engagement with your internal team. Say, hey, what happens in the room, it's confidential, it stays here, and we're just trying to do what's good for the business, and we're not gonna add fire to the rumor mill.
Yeah, we're not trying to hurt feelings. We're trying to solve a problem.
Yeah,
and get everybody moving in the same direction and all that kind of stuff. I wonder have you ever been in a situation where the organization leveraged organizational psychology and maybe even had a dedicated person on site for some of that kind of team building, communication, how to do all that? Does it really work, or is it a lot of nonsense?
I think it may be batting 500 at best. I've seen people kind of use, I personally love DISC. I think it's a great tool. It's less letters to memorize, so only 4. I think it's great. But DISC, it gives you a good shared language, but you can relate it if you're a technical person to technical work. Mm-hmm. But also you can kind of use it as corporate horoscopes if you don't know what you're doing, and then it's just, all right, I've got another week of this class, and it's going to tell me why I am the way I am, and I'm going to throw it in the trash after I'm done. But if you use it intentionally, I think you can make a huge impact.
Yeah, I remember the first time I learned about it, and there were other things out there for those kind of measurements, but it helps you understand somebody's communication and leadership style, even if we're talking about the way they lead themselves.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the one I use, it shows you who you're like under pressure.
Yeah.
So if you can kind of say, all right, well, whenever the cortisol's high, here's what comes out of me. When you squeeze me, here's what comes out. And you can kind of have that vulnerable moment with your team, be like, hey, this is what's going to happen whenever I get squeezed or pressured. And then let's work with each other on how to talk me off the ledge.
Yeah. That's the kind of situation like where you're in an environment where you can essentially be yourself and people can hold you accountable because you hold yourself accountable and you're allowed to hold them accountable in a respectful way.
Right.
But not a soft way. We have to know when something's dangerous or critical or potentially catastrophic.
Yeah, and I think we don't lean into that enough in the industry. We kind of let all those tools go to other people in the business.
Yeah, kind of like a front office type deal, or the head office, the front office, and it's not happening out on the shop floor, out in the warehouse, and all that. I think it's a useful tool. I really do, and it's straightforward, and you can, if you actually use it and apply it, and recognize those characteristics in one another across your team, you can do better.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great tool to have some shared language and say, okay, here's why Susie acts this way or Bobby does this. Maybe let me change my approach.
And that's what it's about. It's not about exposing people. It's about finding out how can we work together, because there's X number of us, and we all have these different personalities. But if we're using DISC, we can have kind of a little bit of a roadmap on how to make adjustments.
Yeah,
it's like you get a bunch of high Ds in one room. I don't know, man. That's a tough one unless they're super focused on the same goal. I just think it's a fascinating way to do it. How long have you been using the DISC?
So I took my first DISC profile probably 8 years ago, and I was really into it. And then I started seeing the value in the technical and maintenance space. So I got my certification to administer DISC and coach people on DISC a few months ago. So that's been a tool that I've been using a lot lately.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. We didn't get to talk much about that.
Yeah.
I knew you were doing something with it, but I think it's when you know how to apply it and you actually do the stuff, keeping it kind of simple.
Yeah.
You'll get results out of it. And the people that think it's a bunch of hogwash, maybe they're just skeptical because of that fear you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Because that fear is not just leadership, it's also everyone. Because when you go to work and you do a job and you're willing to be accountable, you're vulnerable.
Yeah, I think you use it as strategic leverage too. I mean, I'm a very detail-oriented person. I like to dive into the data and understand the why. And I can help offset someone's blind spots who doesn't particularly care for the details. They want the high level. They're much more people-oriented, and I'm more data-driven. We can complement each other in that way. A good person to have on my team would be someone who's very people-centric.
If somebody wanted your help with something like that, is there a way for them to get in touch with you and just say, hey, I want to learn more about what you do. Can you help me?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so just look up Trent McJunkin. Probably something where I've interacted with CMMSradio. You can find me on LinkedIn there, and let's have a conversation.
Yeah, and what I'd like to do is eventually get in deeper to this kind of capstone, but I want to wait until you make it public.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that'll be probably in the coming weeks?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, and you'll let me know?
Absolutely.
All right, man. Well, I don't want to keep you because we're getting ready for some evening stuff here at StrEAMline. We're out in Greenville. Trent McJunkin, thank you, brother, for being here with me again on CMMS Radio.
Thanks, Greg.
Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.